Wylde, a crossdresser and drag performer from the USA.
Hello guys, it's Vera Wylde, and it's time once again for Dear Vera, where I answer questions that you have asked about cross-dressing and anything in relation to all of this.
I wanted to show off my legs. Hey guys, it's Vera Wylde, and I am back again with more tips for beginning cross-dressers.
Hello Vera, and welcome to Teacher.
Hello Helena, very honored that you wanted to interview me.
When did your cross-dressing begin, and where are you at with it today?
I get asked when did I start dressing a lot, and I'm never quite sure how to answer that, because I know from photographs that I've seen that I was, putting on girls' clothes as young as 2 or 3, but I have no real memory of that, and I don't think there was any sort of, in my head, any sense of cross-dressing. It was just playing dress up with what was around, and the kids I grew up with who were close to my age at that time happened to be girls, so when we played dress up with their stuff, I got put in dresses. So I don't really count that too much. Around the time that I hit puberty is really when it kind of started for me. There was a really sizable gap though, because my mother got remarried to a guy who had a number of kids, and I had been an only child up to that point, so suddenly I had no privacy. So pretty much all through high school, which is I think when a lot of us who aren't closeted into adulthood sort of find ourselves a little bit, I just wasn't dressing at all, and it kind of came back again in college. Where I am with it now it's mainly kind of a performance item at this point. When I lived in New York a few years back, I did go out just for fun on occasion. It's not really something I do anymore because now I'm living in Vermont, which is a much more rural area, and at this point it's pretty much limited to the few performance opportunities I have and the videos that I make. And that's pretty much where it is at this point in my life.
And what's attracted you to get into drag performance?
Well, it's funny actually, because I was a performer before I was a cross-dresser. I've always, been kind of hungry for that kind of attention, and then when I was in school I would sing in the choir and I acted, and I tried my hand at stand-up comedy and a number of other things. So the performer side of me was always there, and actually in a way it sort of helped me get a better handle on my dressing, because it gave it a purpose. Which I know for me was really helpful, and I think a lot of us in the early days of us dressing, we try and find a reason that we're doing it, and oftentimes that can be a sexual thing, or it can be finding a female identity. And for me, having the performance aspect where folding it into that really helped me sort of just get a handle on being female and being feminine, and also sort of working my persona, because I could almost kind of just try out different personas just as a performance piece. and not be obligated to keep that up or maintain it. The way I got started in it is I was working at a bar in Boston called Machine, and I was bar backing there, and on Monday nights was drag night, so I was helping out in drag, and they would have an amateur night once a month. So that was how I started actually getting into it, and it just being my tendency to perform anyway, it was a real natural move for me, actually.
And how does it feel to be on stage performing in drag?
It's funny, that's not really something I have thought that much about. In a way, for me, it actually feels very safe, which I'm sure sounds a little weird. I think most people are very fearful of performing on stage because they feel it's a level of exposure. But for me, it's a safe space. It's somewhere that I know I can get up and I can put out this side of myself, and really without fear of rejection. I mean, I think that comes from choosing my venues very carefully. I perform at events and in places where I know, even if they may not like my particular take on drag, they will at least not judge me for being a drag queen. So for me, it's a very secure feeling hitting the stage. I mean, I get the usual nerves you get with any kind of performance, but once I get into it, it's quite liberating for me.
How open are you about your cross-dressing? Do your family know?
I think that I'm fairly open with it. Not everyone in my family knows, but that isn't out of fear of how they would react. It's actually more just sort of, does it even affect them? Do they need to know? Which was something that my wife and I sort of discussed over time. At this point, my mother knows. I have a sister who knows. That's pretty much it, though. But then again, I don't have a particularly large family. I had mentioned earlier my mother had remarried. She got divorced from him, so I'm not particularly close to most of my former step-siblings, though a couple of them, but they don't know. My grandparents don't know. None of my in-laws know. But that's not out of any kind of fear of how they're going to react. It's just, is it really any of their business? And is it worth the hassle? Because they may not judge me harshly for it, but it's something that they would have to process. They would have to deal with. There would be a period of awkwardness, and it's just not important for them to know. Because as much as this is a part of my life, and for me an important part of my life, I'm never going to go over to my sister-in-law's house and see my nieces and nephews in a dress. I mean, that's just never going to happen, and I'm not going to have an urge to do that. So there's no real reason for them to be aware of this part of my life. That said, I am out to the vast majority of my friends, with a few exceptions, but I'm much more open with my friends than with my family, though I do have some friends who don't know either, or at the very least, if they know, I haven't told them.
Do you have any fears, doubts, vulnerability, concerns about being a cross-dresser?
I guess a little bit. I think we all have fears. When we get done up like this, sort of superficially. Could I be doing it better? Could I look better? As we get older, I think a lot of us get paranoid that the things that used to work for us in terms of makeup and clothing, it's not working anymore just because we're older now. So there's some of that. I think really the only fear I have now is as a parent, because I do have a daughter now. She's almost a year, and my wife and I, we're not worried about her. She's actually been introduced to Vera. She's seen me get, put on the makeup and put on the wig and see the whole process so that she understands that this is Daddy and it's not a different person, so that she can kind of get acclimatized to that. So I'm not worried about her. I am worried about people she meets, other kids, parents of other kids. And it's sort of been finding a way to have this seem normal to her and not have it not be some strange, shameful secret that we're keeping, but at the same time not something that she's just going around telling her classmates, oh, Daddy wears a dress, because that's not fair to her, to put her in a situation like that where she would get picked on for something that I'm doing. And that's sort of where my fear is with cross-dressing at this point. And before she was born, honestly, I didn't have a lot of fears. This has never been something that's been a source of paranoia for me. I've never really worried about being found out or any of the rest of that. It's just part of who I am, and if people can't deal with that, then that's on them. That's not on me.
What are the negatives about being a cross-dresser?
The negatives of being a cross-dresser? I don't know, because I don't generally think of it in terms of what's good about it, what's bad about it. I mean, it's well, I suppose there's the shopping, there's the financial burden, because not only do I have to maintain a wardrobe as a man, I now appreciate why shopping for women is such an experience and such an event, because when you're buying women's clothes, you can't just go out and buy a blouse. You buy a blouse, you don't have a skirt that goes with it. You have to get a skirt. Now you got this blouse and shirt, this blouse skirt combination, and you don't have shoes to go with it. You have to get new shoes, and oh God, it's maddening. But I don't think there's anything that's negative about being a crossdresser. That wouldn't just be something maybe negative that a normal woman might encounter. Leg shaving, things like that. And with something like leg shaving, it's a little different. We have to do it more frequently, but I don't think I'm having a hard time thinking of any particular negative aspects unique to cross-dressing.
What would you say are the positives about being a cross-dresser?
Well, for me, I think it's given me... I don't want to be so arrogant as to say it's given me a better understanding of women, but I think it's let me into certain aspects of women's life and things that they have to deal with that most men just aren't privy to. And I think a lot of it is stuff that puzzles most men, and just sort of in the process of putting on the makeup and putting on the clothes and walking around in heels, I think I've gained kind of a more of an appreciation for what it is that women go through and what's expected of them. And I don't think that men who aren't cross-dressers can't come to these same realizations. I just think that it's now at this point so obvious to me, these things that they go through, whereas a man who isn't a cross-dresser has to really, really kind of go out of his way to come to understand these things that at this point are just almost intuitive.
I noticed you do some modelling. Tell me about that. That looks like fun.
I find the modeling to be extremely rewarding. It's something that I don't get to do all that often, and at this point even less than I get to do drag shows anymore, but it's something that I actually started modeling even before I started going on stage, because I really wanted... I didn't just want to dress like a woman. I wanted to look good. And in the early days, knowing that I was still getting a handle on makeup and on the style and all of that, I kind of knew that the best thing I could do was to get in cahoots with someone who, at the very least, could take a very good picture. And then I would get better at my part, and it would all sort of come together down the road. And that's kind of what's happened at this point. There's an excitement to modeling. There's a sense of exploration with modeling. At least there has been for me, because very rarely have I worked with a photographer who was looking for a specific shot, who wanted to just pose me in something and get a picture. I haven't really had to work with that. Pretty much everyone who I have worked with is much more interested in, talking about a general feel for something and then just seeing what happens and exploring the clothes, exploring the setting. Maybe we're creating, almost telling a story, exploring what the story of the shoot is. And that's a lot of fun for me. As someone who has been a performer, and, I've acted a lot, not professionally, but sort of exploring those sorts of things fairly freely is a really, really rewarding experience for me. It's something I love doing, and I kind of wish I could do more of these days, but I absolutely love to do it when I get the chance.
What are your favourite styles of women's clothing?
That's actually a question that I don't think I can answer, because since I'm not just going out to go out anymore, and even when I was doing that, I was doing it so rarely, pretty much all the clothes I buy are bought with performance in mind. So I'm very, very rarely do I ever buy an article of clothing just because I think it would look nice. Generally, I buy it because I have a photo shoot in mind, or I have a performance number in mind with it. And then as a result, my wardrobe is all over the place, from very sort of fetishy things to sort of country girl things to clubbing sort of outfits, and it's all over the place, and it's always been in service of the performance. The most of my shopping choices. So I don't really know if I've found a style that is just sort of my style that I would just go out in. I certainly have things that I'm comfortable going out in, but I don't think I could actually nail down a style for me.
Do you love high heels?
I have a love-hate relationship with high heels. I think they look fantastic, and I absolutely understand the necessity of them. I don't particularly enjoy wearing them. I don't dislike it enough to stop wearing them, because I do think they set off an outfit wonderfully, and they can be incredibly sexy, but they're not fun for me. There are some dressers that are just in love with the shoes, and I'm just not. They're part of the whole thing, but I don't have any particular love for high heels.
Do you become a woman when you dress as Vera?
I never really thought of it in those specific terms, but yes. When I do the dress, when I put the wig on, which is usually the last thing I do, I think of myself in feminine terms, and I want people to address me as they would address a woman at that point, because I certainly don't think of myself as a man in a dress. I think of myself as a woman. I mean, I know I'm not a woman. Even with all this on, I know I'm not really a woman, but that's the mindset that I go into when I do get all this put on. So yeah.
Would you ever transition into being a woman full time?
No, I never would. The thing is, for me, I love doing this, and this is a very big part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. And it never has. And I know for a lot of dressers, this is an expression of something that they wish they were every day. And for me, it's not. I don't feel strange in my male skin, which I know most who choose to transition, they feel somehow wrong in their male body. I don't. I'm actually completely comfortable day-to-day life as a man, just as I'm very comfortable going out as a woman, as Vera. So I don't have that sort of issue with my male life that I think most who choose to transition have. So no, I would never. I like being a man. I enjoy being a man. I love being a man. It's just I also have this other side of me that I express at times, and I love doing that as well, but no, I would never do a full transition.
Is there a sexual side to your cross-dressing?
Not really. I mean, I can certainly feel sexy And certainly as a performer, given that a lot of my drag is in the vein of burlesque, there's a sexual aspect to my performance numbers, but no, there isn't really a sexual side to my dressing, and there never really has been for the most part. I don't dress to get off, and it's not part of my sex life. It doesn't enter into the bedroom, and it never really has. And I certainly don't judge people who have this as a sexual thing. I know a lot of dressers do, but that's just never really been the reasoning for me. It's never been the impetus for me to put on a dress.
What is your own sexuality?
I do consider myself to be straight. I am married, and I am married to a woman. I mentioned earlier I do have a daughter. So I do consider myself to be straight. Now, I mean, that said, I had a questioning period and an experimental period, as I think a lot of straight dressers probably do, because we don't have a lot of frame of reference for being straight and putting on women's clothes. Because the sort of representations we see of cross-dressers, in the media and in society and in entertainment, they're always gay. And so when, in my early days of dressing, I was thinking, well, I must be gay, or I must at least be bi, and it was only sort of eventually just setting the labels aside and just trying to just look at me. Forget everyone else and just look at me, that I sort of came to realize, no, I'm straight. I am straight. And at this point, I'm completely comfortable with that. And I don't look back at, my questioning phase with any kind of shame or remorse. It was part of the journey that I had to go through.
Can you act like a woman when you're in male company? Do you get flirty?
Oh, I love to flirt. I adore flirting. That said, I really hate being hit on. And I do distinguish between the two, because to me flirting it's playful, it's kind of intellectual almost, it's a little back and forth. It may not mean anything. It's an end unto itself, really. You can flirt just to flirt and just to have fun. Being hit on is when somebody basically comes up to you and says, hey, I want to have sex with you, what do you think of that? And, they don't use those exact words, but, they offer you a drink, or they ask you out, or they ask you back to their place, or they do this or they do that, with a very clear goal of they want to sleep with you. And I don't enjoy being hit on, just because it kills flirting is what it does. As I said, I love to flirt, but flirting is playful, it's light, and it doesn't have to mean anything. But I'm perfectly comfortable flirting with men, flirting with women, and I enjoy flirting. I flirt much better as Vera than I do as a man. I'm a terrible, very bad at flirting as a man. As Vera, I think I do it quite well.
What got you started on your series of cross-dressing advice videos?
I think it was a combination of things. The first being, I did fairly frequently get questions, usually through my Flickr account, from people who were just asking sorts of questions that I've been answering in the videos, about techniques for dressing. Tucking came up as a question a lot, and things like that. And sort of as those came up, realizing how many people just they have no guide. They've really got no place to go to try and get these questions answered. And I kind of had just sort of sat with that idea for a while. I think moving to Vermont was really what got me started actually getting out off my butt and making the videos. I think partially as a performance outlet, to be honest, because as I mentioned, now that I'm in a much more rural area, I very rarely get a chance to perform. Certainly nowhere near as often as I did living in New York City. So I see this almost as a chance to perform to the camera. It's not quite the same, but it gives me more of a reason to dress than just putting all this on, looking in the mirror, strutting up and down the hallway a few times in heels and going, oh, that was fun, and putting everything back. I think I spent so many years performing and dressing primarily to perform that I kind of need a purpose. I need to be dressing for something. Otherwise, I feel like I've kind of wasted a lot of time doing all this for no real reason. Very positive response I've gotten from people who have found them helpful, or people who didn't even need them but still enjoyed watching them. I've gotten a surprising amount of positive feedback from women who know crossdressers or are dating them, which was not something I expected. So yeah, it's been wonderfully satisfying.
Do you have plans for other videos in the future?
It's harder to find time now. Since my daughter was born, just because I've got an infant who is not literally running around yet, but that's probably coming any day now. So it's harder to find the time these days. Plus, I've hit pretty much all of the initial topics that I had planned to talk about when I started making them. So it's harder to think of stuff to make the videos about. But no, I do have some ideas for some new ones, and I'm always up for suggestions if there's stuff that people want to have answered that I haven't covered already.
One of my favourite topics here. What do you think about the word transvestite?
It's not one that I personally use to describe myself. I try not to get hung up on the labels too much anyways, because there's a lot of different terms for men who put on the appearance of a woman, and the meaning behind those terms can be any sorts of things as to whether they have transitioned, are transitioning, whether it's sexual, non-sexual. The reason I tend to avoid the word transvestite is, at least in my experience, most people associate some sort of sexual nature with the term transvestite. It has the ring of almost like a shrink, like it's something that you'd be diagnosed as. And I think a lot of people link a sort of a sexual desire to the word transvestite that they don't necessarily attach to just crossdresser, which is generally the term that I prefer to use for myself.
What do you love most about becoming Vera?
I don't know if I could pinpoint any one thing. It's wonderfully freeing to be able to fully embrace this whole aspect of myself, because as much as, you know, I put on a different voice, and obviously there's a lot of makeup, and I go by a different name, this is still me. This all comes out of me. This isn't a mask that I put on, and this isn't a character that I'm playing. All of this is amped up aspects of myself that I normally don't get to express in my day-to-day life. And I think they're the sorts of things that most men, and myself included, in our day-to-day lives tend to suppress. So rather than having to always suppress, you know, the feminine aspects of my personality, I get to bring them out and embrace them fully. And that, for me, is a wonderful thing.
Thank you for agreeing to do the interview, Vera. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful.